Leadership is about doing the right things, but management, on the other hand, is about doing things right. And Peter Drucker said that, and Drucker was one of the most famous management thinkers of our time. Now, for just one moment, I'd like you to think about this important question or point which Drucker makes. What should a manager be doing? In other words, what activities should be a top priority for managers? Well, when I asked that question, what should a manager be doing, you might have thought about a management situation you're familiar with, maybe a success case or a case of excellence in management, and what that excellent management might have looked like, etc. Or maybe you were thinking about a case where management had failed, and you were wondering, what was that? Why did management fail in that particular case? Well, Drucker also said that any discussion on management must first begin with the tasks to be performed, the tasks of the manager, and also the performance of those tasks, the results, in other words. And that statement in itself is enough for all of us to understand the meaning of management. And because of the significance of Drucker's statement, in this bootcamp session, we're going to look more deeply into Drucker's definition of the primary tasks of a manager. And we'll do this because in doing that, we can all better understand what it really means to be a manager. Well, Drucker helps us here because he divided the task of a manager into 5 basic tasks. And those 5 tasks were setting objectives, organizing, motivating and communicating, measuring performance, and developing people. So now let's go through each of these 5 tasks of a manager. The first task of the manager is setting objectives. According to Drucker, the manager sets goals for the group and decides what work needs to be done to meet those goals. But along with deciding the necessary goals and decisions, those defined goals and the decisions made as a result of those goals, management must enhance the economic performance of the business in question. And this is very important to remember because management and only management can justify its existence and authority based solely on the economic results it produces. And the management of any business has failed if it fails to produce economic results. In other words, management has also failed if it does not supply goods and services desired by consumers at a price the consumer is willing to pay. And management has also failed if it doesn't improve or at least maintain the wealth-producing capacity of the economic resources entrusted to it in the business. Well, according to Drucker, the bottom line, or the real purpose of management, is in fact the responsibility for profitability. And this means responsibility that the primary task of the manager is to set objectives in order to optimize economic output of the company. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that statement? Maybe you're thinking, what about the people? What about the employees? What about their best interest? What about the customers? What about the society as a whole? What about the nation, etc.? Well, Drucker does take those into account in his philosophy on management and the tasks of a manager. But let's come back to those ideas in a moment, if that's okay with you, because we have a few other things to discuss first. If we follow the principles of Peter Drucker on the meaning of management, then what management really means is, and this is important to remember, managers take the responsibility for profitability. And they take that responsibility by setting the objectives which help the business to achieve profitability and optimize economic output. And to help managers achieve these objectives, Drucker invented the concept of MBO, or Management by Objectives, which is very popular in most companies. When practicing management by objectives, it helps managers to measure the performance of employees in comparison to the typical standards of a job they might be completed. When practicing management by objectives, managers must follow 4 important rules. And these are important for you to know. Those rules are, first, managers must ensure that the chosen objectives are aligned with the corporate vision, mission, in other words, the strategy. Second, managers must define individual goals for each of the individual's objectives that they've identified. Third, managers must decide what has to be done in order to reach those defined objectives. And finally, fourth, managers must actively and efficiently communicate those objectives to other people whose performance is needed to achieve those objectives. And the communication is important. Drucker also said that if employees help determine the MBO activities and standards of performance, they are much more likely to fulfill them or be actively supporting them. To make sure that the manager's objectives are valid and relevant, they should meet Drucker's SMART criteria. He established the SMART acronym. S, the objectives must be specific. M, they must be measurable. A, they must be achievable. R, they must be realistic. And finally, those objectives must be time-bound, or in other words, set within a specific timeline or a start and stop point. And that's the SMART acronym. In the next video, we'll discuss the second task of a manager according to Drucker, which is organizing. But let's end this video by reminding ourselves of the real purpose of a manager, and in Peter Drucker's own words. Management can only justify its existence and authority based on the economic results it produces, and by using management by objectives, managers are more likely to produce those desired results.